Hi everyone, welcome to Little Wicket Railway. I'm Rob and in this video we're adding scenery to the G-Gauge Railway. This is my G-Gauge Railway that runs around the outside of the room at head height. And I made a video all about the build. I'll put a link up here if you want to go check it out. But it's a pretty basic layout. It was never intended to be a proper scenic railway. I just liked the bigger scale models and needed somewhere to run them that wasn't going to get in the way of the 00 gauge railway down here. It's mostly on these white shelves running along the wall or suspended from the ceiling with hangers. And most of the models are from the Bachmann and Thomas & Friends range or the cheaper LGB stuff, which is a bit toy-like and scales are all over the place. Realism was never going to be a priority for this railway and I wasn't going to bother with scenery. However, a few bits have crept in over in that corner because they came with an LGB train set and it seemed a shame not to use them. And I did make that low relief building using the laser cutter, which turned out okay. And I did make the signals for the DCC-X automation. So it seems like scenery has been appearing in places. The 00 gauge layout is progressing down here and once it's built, working on the G-Gauge railway is going to be pretty tricky. So if I'm going to do scenic stuff, then it needs to happen now. And I've decided to go for it. The railway's set in the Malvern Hills, so I'm going to paint some rolling green hills onto the wall with a bright blue sky behind them. Then this area was meant to be the station, so I'm going to laser cut a low relief station building. And finally, my friend Nick has unofficially named it the Malvern Sills Railway because it's set in the Malvern Hills. It runs along a kind of sill, still rhymes with hill so you can see what he was thinking, but we need to make that official by adding a sign. Right, let's get cracking, starting with the station. For inspiration, I'm using Great Malvern Station, which is a beautiful Victorian station built with Malvern stone and lots of decorative touches. It's not going to be possible to accurately recreate the full station building because 1, it's too big for the space. 2, I'm under a bit of time pressure to get this done because I want to crack on with the 00 gauge layout. 3, I'm not the best at designing laser cut structures. But I have put together something that I think captures the key elements in Lightburn. I've got a very narrow platform that I'm hoping won't interfere with the trains. I did measure the space between the wall and the track, but it's going to be tight. Then sitting on that, I've got a low relief structure that has a main set of doors in the middle that lead out from the booking hall. On the left here, I'm saying this is the parcels office, and over on the right is a door leading out to the waiting room. I'm going to use 3.6mm plywood for this because I happen to have that to hand, and I'm not laser engraving the Malvern stone effect onto the wood because it would take ages, so I'm going to print that out onto card and glue it over the top later. The parcels office and the booking room have the rectangular windows and the waiting room has the fancier arched windows just like at Great Malvern. The door and window surrounds are going to be laser cut from greyboard and added later on. We've got a couple of chimneys at the top. Then I've designed a very narrow canopy that will be supported by these brackets to go over the platform. Again, I think I've given enough clearance so this doesn't get clipped by any of the passing trains. This is going to take quite some time to cut, and whilst the laser is doing its thing, let's get painting. I don't like painting and I'm not very good at painting, plus I'm partially colourblind. So this needs to be really simple and I think I've got a plan. At the back, running along, we're going to have some bright blue paint representing the sky. Then in front of that, we're going to have a dark green hill, and I've sketched that on here. You might be able to just see the line. And in front of that, we're going to have a light green hill. So that all seems pretty simple. I need to move this stuff out the way so I don't get paint on it and then put some protection down so I don't get paint all over the shelves. And then I think it's time just to get stuck in and see how it goes. And get stuck in I did. The blue paint was designed to go on walls so it went on pretty well in most places. I tried to make sure that I didn't cross my pencil sketch lines, but that wasn't always easy because I was using a roller. I massively overestimated how much blue paint I would need and I had tons of the stuff left over. Working at height and having to lean over to reach the walls wasn't too much fun, but I was able to put my 00 gauge baseboards to the test by standing on them at times, and I'm pleased to report that they held up well. Next up was the dark green paint, and this was standard acrylic stuff. It went on super thick and was a lot darker than I thought it would be, even with the white behind it. At this point, I was starting to question my decision to paint directly onto the walls when I've got the artistic ability of a 5-year-old. The light green paint was a lot thinner than the dark green paint, so when applied with a brush you could see the brush strokes. But I quite liked that because it made it look a bit more like grass or ploughed fields. At least that's what I told myself to make myself feel better. Seeing as I filmed myself knocking value off my house for your entertainment, would you do me a favour and subscribe to the channel, and maybe I'll invest the ad revenue from this video on an art lesson or two. Whilst the paint was drying on the walls, I turned my attention back to the station building. Here are all the parts that have come off the laser cutter, and I've also printed out the Malvern stone and roof tiles on card to be stuck onto the wood and create the illusion of texture. Before I can start gluing anything together though, the parts needed to be painted, starting with the platforms. I gave the brickwork a spray with Halford's red primer, and I appreciate that my technique with the rattle can isn't much better than my technique with the paintbrush, but I still managed to get a pretty even finish. And you can still see the laser engraved brick outlines. Then the platform tops got a coat of grey, and I appreciate there's more I could do to make these pieces look like paving or brickwork, but as I said, we're not going for realism here, I'm just doing enough to make it not look like plywood. Finally, the doors and window frames got a coat of gloss red to make them stand out. Green and red are going to be the main colours on this station. Whilst the sprayed parts were drying, it was back into the workshop to hand paint the rest of the detail parts such as the eaves, the canopy and the canopy supports. I did the Wicket style canopy edging in a cream colour, and that paint came out the bargain bucket in B&Q and only cost me 50p. Then I moved on to sticking the card sheets onto the front of the wood, and this was my favourite part because it was quick, easy and the effect is instantaneous. I was worried that the joins between the card would be obvious, but because the Malvern stone pattern is quite random, they're not that easy to see. Tacky glue was the adhesive of choice for this project, and I used it pretty much everywhere, apart from a handful of things where I needed a stronger bond, so I went with super glue. Then it was time to fit the glossy doors and windows to the rear of the building and fit the surrounds. The door and window surrounds were laser cut out of thick grey card, but unlike the wood, the laser engraved stones weren't very obvious, so I decided to paint them up in the green and cream colours to make the different parts stand out a bit more. A tedious job, but definitely worth the effort. After that, it was just a case of assembling the canopy and the platforms, and that was the structure largely complete. So this is where I've got to so far. All the doors, windows are on with all the surrounding bits. I've put the texture on, we've got the tiles on top and we've got the canopy. We've got the platform pieces here. Just put a white edge around there and they are ready to go up the top. But I thought it looked a bit unsymmetrical, so I've produced an end piece to go on here, just to make it a bit longer. I know it's not going to tie in perfectly, but I think it looks better that way. And it makes it slightly longer as well, which is good because it will fill the space better. Next things, I am going to put in some pictures behind the windows. So that will be the parcels office, for example. And then I've also got some glazing that can go over there. So I've got some acetate sheet. So I'm going to do all the windows to just add a bit of glazing effect onto there. And then I've got the same to go on top of the canopy for the glass that goes in there. To hide this seam, I've printed a couple of drain pipes. One that's going to go on there, one that's going to go on there. So this is guttering down pipes, just a bit of detail. And then along the top, I've 3D printed these edging strips that are going to go on there. So there's a few of those that need to be stuck into place. So it's just all the extra details now. And then at the end of the platform, Malvern's pretty famous for its street lamps, which inspired Lion the Witch in the Wardrobe. And I had one of these from a box of stuff I'd bought at a flea market. So it's quite a nice little lamp. The base was too big, so I've 3D printed a new one. It originally had a filament bulb in there. I've replaced it with an LED. And then I thought it might be quite nice to just put that on the end of the platform. And then we can wire that into the 5 volts that are running around the layout currently to power the LEDs and the servos. So that will take 5 volts and go on there. So those are my next bits. That's what I'm going to get done. and then it should be in a position where we can stick it up onto the wall. To secure the glazing in place, I used a product called Glue and Glaze from Deluxe Materials because it dries quickly and clear. I decided that the extra extension piece that I'd made would be the toilets, so for that window I wanted frosted glass. Initially I tried to get the frosted look by sanding some of the clear acetate, but it didn't work very well. Instead I ended up putting a piece of off-white translucent carrier bag behind the glazing, which gave a much better frosted effect. Something I haven't done but will add in future is signs on the doors so that everyone knows what they are. There are lots of small details that I could have added, for example a clock, or Great Malvern still has scales built into the platform, so it might have been nice to include those. But these are all things that I can come back and add at a later date. Okay, so I think we're in a position to put the station into place. Everything's still drying a bit. I'm not 100% happy with the colour of these dark hills at the back, and I might need to have another go at that at some point in the future, but I'm going to be securing these to the walls using the command strips, which are those ones that are removable. They're like Velcro. So I can always take this off again and have another go at painting. It'll be a bit trickier once I've put the 00 gauge layout in place, but it's probably not going to be impossible. But I just want to get this in now and then we can see how it looks. This is the piece of platform that's got the lamp on it. And I've used one of the Model Rail Electrics dropper boards, and I will tie that into the 5-volt power supply that's going to the LEDs on the signals. So let's just get it in place for now and see how it looks. So that's the platform in place. Let's get the station up there now. That's one. Do the other one. Right, fingers crossed this works. Because if it doesn't, don't really have a backup plan. Right, we sort of want it in the middle. That's the middle. And that's one of them. And that's the other one. And let's hold it there for a second. That seems to be staying in place. Let's do the other piece. This bit's a bit smaller, that should be easier to do. And we've got, because it's smaller, I'm using smaller command strips as well. And that is going to go up here. The station's now on the wall. It seems to be staying on with the command strips, which is a good sign. I need to sort the lamp out, that's my next job, and I might add a few bushes or trees or something down that end because it's looking a bit empty at the moment, but let me tweak it a bit and then we'll come back to it. And here's the finished station. The lamp is all wired in and working. I've added in a couple of pieces of basic foliage at either end to bring a bit more life to it, and we've got the station master ready to greet the trains. Sir Topham Hatt has even popped in to take a look. And I know it's not perfect, I've had to stop myself from working on it because it was taking up far too much time. As I've already said, there are loads more details that I could have added, but there's nothing stopping me from coming back to it in the future. I think it's another great example of how modern technology such as laser cutters and 3D printers can be used together to relatively quickly create quite a large piece of scenery. It's definitely a huge improvement on the plain white wall that was there before. So that's as much as I'm going to do on the station building for now. The last thing I want to do is to give this railway a proper name. So I've laser cut this totem, the Malvern Sills Railway. I think that is going to go up here. So that's about it for this video. We've got the hills painted up on the walls, we've got the station building, and we've given the railway a name, and that's all I really wanted to achieve. And now I can turn my attention back to the 00 gauge layout underneath. If I had more time or I could do this again, there probably are a few things I would change or tweak, but generally I'm pretty happy with how it's turned out. If you've got any tips for doing low relief scenery or painting your own back scenes, then let me know in the comments. Special thanks to all the YouTube members and patrons for your support. It's very much appreciated, and I'll put your names up on the screen now. If you've enjoyed this video, then please give it a like and subscribe to the channel. It's completely free and I would really appreciate it. But that's about it. Thanks for watching, and I will hopefully see you again soon.